Hi there, I'm Chris Dougherty, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of the Faculty at Chestnut Hill College. I'm delighted to be joined today by three experts who will be speaking with us about everything that COVID-19 and the phenomena around it has meant to us in terms of competitive sports, youth sports, up through intercollegiate athletics, and just the ceasing of that activity at a point in time in March and what that's meant for so many people on so many different levels. And so I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. William Ernst. Bill Ernst is a faculty member in the Doctor of Psychology program in clinical psychology. He's also the founding executive director of the Center for Concussion Education and Research at Chestnut Hill College. He's led a team that's was awarded funding from the NCAA DoD Mind Matters Educational Programs Challenge, and he was co-principal investigator of a multi-site randomized control trial of that peer concussion education program. His research focuses on development and evaluation of educational interventions designed to increase concussion knowledge and symptom reporting in athletics, and also has research interests in sports-related concussion, neuropsychological consultation with school personnel, and performance validity testing during neuropsychological assessment. He's completed a postdoctoral fellowship in clinical neuropsych at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, Cooper Hospital, and also maintains an independent practice in clinical neuropsychology, focusing on assessment of children and adults with various neurodevelopmental and neurological conditions, including ADHD, learning disabilities, and traumatic brain injury. Dr. Jason Freeman is assistant professor of psychology at Chestnut Hill College. He teaches courses in sports psychology, psychology of health, stress, and coping, cognitive psychology, general psychology, and creating success. He has served in a variety of functions in athletic advising and student services at a number of colleges and universities. His specific expertise is student-athlete performance and development training, and he's worked with collegiate student-athletes on enhancing performance, motivation, sports school experience, and overall well-being, managing transition, performing through stress and anxiety, and facilitating improvement of group and team dynamics. He's also done curriculum development and instruction, and experience developing and teaching courses in workshops in mental performance, sports psychology, health and well-being, and other related topics. Jesse Balser was named the college's Director of Athletics and Recreation in October 2018. In his role as assistant and then associate athletic director before becoming director of athletics and recreation, Jesse assisted with the management of all intercollegiate and intramural athletic programs offered at the college and the administrative, operational, and business and compliance functions of the department in accordance with policies and procedures of the NCAA. He was a part of the transition at the college from Division III to Division II competitive athletics at Chestnut Hill College and has served on various NCAA committees, including the regional advisory committees for women's tennis, men's basketball, and women's lacrosse. Balser joined Chestnut Hill College athletic staff as the head coach of the men's basketball program since its inception in 2003. And under his direction, the men's basketball program was the college's first to reach postseason play as a member of the NCAA Division II and the Central Atlantic Collegiate Conference. He's earned his master's degree in administration of human services as well from Chestnut Hill College in 2011. So gentlemen, to each of you, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, and I'm really delighted to have you here and to learn more about the topic. So first, just based on your combined experience and expertise, I was hoping you could share with us the responses, your responses to the reality that across all stages of development, from youth sports to high school sports to intercollegiate athletics, we've seen organized sports suspended. And just wanted to invite first your thoughts and comments with regard to that phenomenon. And Bill, if we could start with you.
Sure. I mean, this really hits home for me, not only as a researcher, but as a parent of a youth athlete. I have a 15-year-old son who's a very competitive soccer player. And so we went from 3 practices a week, a game a week, a lot of training in terms of fitness training. So, almost 7 days a week, year round, pretty much, to nothing. So that is a major adjustment, not only for young men and women youth athletes that are really working hard in training, but also for their parents, for their families. So A couple of things that really come up. I see this, Chris, as having a few different dimensions to it. One is physical fitness and the sense of well-being one gets from being physically active. So that's been interrupted to some extent. Another one, and I know Jesse can really speak to this as a former collegiate athlete and a coach, but is just the depreciation in skill and that competitive edge from not competing and training at a high level. And then there's also for student athletes, even down to the youth level, that loss of camaraderie, that social piece. That is a big loss. And, more so at the youth level, my wife and I would often joke how youth soccer's kind of taken over our lives. But one nice, benefit is you do get to meet a lot of people, the other fellow parents of the kids in the team. So this becomes, quite a important social network and social outlet. All that has changed. And, I don't want to go too far into this in this moment, and if it's relevant, maybe I'll touch into it. But, as a researcher, someone that studies concussion, what we found with our research with respect to this is one of the things that keeps athletes from reporting their concussions is concerns that they're going to miss out on that social, activity. There's a lot of team-based social networking and activities that take place that if they report their concussion, they can't be a part of because they have headaches. They are going through a protocol where they really need to step back, rest a lot, not get stimulated too much. And they often feel pretty miserable, so they really don't want to anyway. But they really start to experience a sense of social isolation where they go from practicing, being on the team bus, traveling with the team, then hanging out with the team afterwards for some social event or some bonding activity, and then they can't do any of that. So there are a few parallels that we've seen with our concussion research to this current situation.
Jason, your thoughts on the phenomenon, just from the perspective of everything we're seeing in terms of this discontinuation and what it means from your perspective?
Yeah. So I think, that word in and of itself really resonates with me, just perspective. I think when something like this happens and it's impacting everyone globally, it really puts everything in perspective, I think, and just kind of drives home this idea of, realigning priorities and really understanding what's important. So I think, in America, specifically, and particularly as it pertains to sports, we sort of, we place it on this pedestal where, it's really, really important. And it's like the most important thing in life for a lot of people. But then something like this happens and all of a sudden you have this realignment in a lot of cases of priorities. And, now the most important thing for everyone is, taking care of myself, staying healthy, taking care of my family, taking care of my loved ones, and being concerned. So now it becomes, how, am I a good family member and I'm a good citizen? Am I a responsible human being? And that becomes the most important thing. And, to sort of, I guess, think about that theoretically and sort of looking at it, a little bit of like Psych 101. We sort of go back to this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if anyone's seen that before. But it's this idea that we have, as human beings, we have these sort of base needs, and at the bottom of that pyramid is sort of our physiological well-being. We need food, we need air, we need water, we need those things. And then right above that is this need for safety, this need for health. And the idea behind that whole concept is, you can't ascend to higher levels of the pyramid of, am I being the best student I can be? Am I being the best athlete I can be? Am I self-actualized? Am I reaching all of my potential? You can't even address those things if you're sort of stuck at the lower parts of that pyramid. And I think something like this, that has such a broad impact and can be so devastating for so many people's lives, kind of knocks us all back on that pyramid. So now, you have to really be concerned for your health and your safety, and the other things kind of take a back seat. And I think that that can be pretty jarring, particularly for people who are, at this high level, elite level of athleticism, where you're constantly trying to just sort of tinker with, how can I be, I'm a 99 right now, how can I get to 100? Whereas now, that's not so important in that exact moment. So I think it's something that we're all dealing with, just in terms of sort of readjusting our priorities and reassessing where we are. So I think as an opening statement, there's some other things I want to get into, but we can sort of table it for later in the discussion, I think.
Jesse, I had an opportunity to see some of the honors that you and your team in athletics did for the student athletes very recently, and speaking to all the experiences of this past year. What are you seeing from your perspective in terms of the dynamics that we're talking about with regard to ceasing all this activity, and what it's meant for our students, for our coaches, for your programs?
I'll tell you what, I've been on pretty much a mental roller coaster going through this whole process, feeling like I'm going through them with the kids. And I'm not positive. I go on a lot of different ways in terms of what this pandemic has done for athletics at the college level, at the youth level. At first, the first couple weeks, no basketball, no hockey, baseball might be delayed. Our college teams are not going to have playoffs. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? A couple weeks set in, and I start to really appreciate the time I'm getting to spend with my kids and have family dinners and stuff. And I start to wonder. I wonder if this is settling in with I'm hoping that that's settling in with the athletes as well. I'm pretty much of an eternal optimist about things, and I still won't admit or say there's not going to be sports. I know it's going to change. There is going to be a different norm, but I don't. I think probably the most important thing for me that I'd like to talk about is, particularly with youth sports, and Bill touched on a little bit, is the socialization part. I think this hurts them, the youth sports, the most, because you have a lot of kids. When you get to the college level, it's all the elite kids. It's the men and women that stuck with it, really love it. They're very in tune to it. They're keeping their bodies right for when the time does come. But for the youth, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. My battery is dying, but I'm good now. But for the youth, the socialization part is huge, because a lot of kids are playing, not because some of them like it, don't love it. Some of them, the parents are making them do it. Some of them, they're forced to. Maybe their mom or dad has a lot of work, and this is a way to get them involved in something, and good way to exercise. And that's the piece that I'm worried about the most, is the young kids that aren't getting a chance to socialize and get that extra exercise in. And yeah, we can take our kids out and take them for walks, take them for runs, do things to keep them occupied. But there is nothing quite like being on a team. And I've coached at the youth level. You see kids come up to practice, and in school that kid, that boy or girl, might not have a lot of friends, but they walk onto that team, and these are their friends, and you can see on their face they just love being there. And that's a great hour or two for them to socialize with their peers, feel like they're part of something, and keep on moving. So I really think a lot back towards the younger kids than I do the college, because I think the college athletes, while it is tough, a lot of them are working, once they're finished playing college sports, they're going to get a job. There's a very small handful that are going to play professionally, and that's all fine and good. They're old enough now to know how to maintain their bodies if that's what they really want. And then you're going to have those other men and women who don't love it that much, but they're playing it to stay in shape, to finish college. Maybe it's paying for college for them. And for some, it might have been a blessing. Whew, now I can focus on my last 2 months doing schoolwork, albeit it is online, but I'm finishing my schoolwork. I'm ready to work. So, I'm not trying to downplay the effect that it's had on our college student athletes. But I think I look back mainly at the younger kids who athletics is so much more than winning and losing, and it's a lot more about their socialization skills and the relationships they're building, maybe with a coach. You have young kids who maybe don't have a lot of adult figures, and they have a coach who just does a great job with him or her, and they just love to go to practice to hear what he or she has to say. That's the stuff that I think could hurt in the long run.
That's interesting. So I'd like to stick with this concept of the socialization because you each referred to it in your comments. And I guess the thing I'll ask in follow up is sort of given the important socialization role that youth sports up to intercollegiate athletic sports provides, what are we losing right now in terms of opportunities? What's being lost? And then from the perspective of coming back to some new normal, but with the expectation we'll be together again. Competing. What needs to be regained when we have those moments that we do come back and we do start to see the resumption of formalized activity in any kind of athletics? And just any of you, so, yeah.
Okay. I just talked, so why doesn't somebody else?
I was thinking, in terms of your first question, asking what do we lose. And I think Bill and Jesse both sort of touched on this a bit already, but, a lot of athletes, both, youth, collegiate, professional, sort of at all levels, their lives are built around their athletic identity, around, that part of their lives. So all of their friends are their teammates. Maybe the support structure that they have is in the form of coaches and administrators and other support personnel that are surrounding their athletic participation. So I think it's you couldn't put enough value on what sport means to, I think, a lot of athletes. You're talking basically blowing up the entire scaffolding of your life in some cases. This is sort of where I'm getting everything. So I think it could be potentially really, really difficult if someone is depending on that and they don't have sort of alternative structures and alternative people in their lives to turn to in order to manage the absence of this part.
Bill, what do you think?
I think one of the things that, and Jesse alluded to this at the youth level, there's a lot of kids that organized sports becomes one of the most important ways in which they learn social skills. They learn physical fitness, and also that they learn being part of a team. And that kind of experience can serve them throughout their lives. I mean, we're all on teams one way or the other, whether it's your family team or whether it's, your professional life, where we have to work with each other. We have to work together towards a common goal. Not everyone's going to be the star. We have starters and role players. We have people with special niches that come into play. So that becomes a very important template for kids to learn. And abundance, that these are things that you can do to skills that you can learn in order to that you'll be able to apply in your professional life and in your adult life. So I think my concern is that some kids might fall off of the whole sports scene with this disruption for whatever reason. Just this little disruption that's happening, and obviously it's a very serious situation, but time-wise, my guess is most youth athletes are going to miss about a season, maybe a season and a half. But what I worry is how many of those aren't going to come back, just because it just interrupts their flow. Other priorities come up. So.
Any thoughts about where that would be likely to happen in terms of a student who might just discontinue their activity because of what they're experiencing now?
I have a number of my players who have pretty much given up on doing schoolwork since they've left campus.
Wow.
And I've tried my best. I've offered them to come to my house to do what they have to do. If they need a place that's quiet, they need a place where they can just kind of get away from the madness that's going on in their neighborhood. But there was some good momentum. Kids, first generation college kids who had momentum. And when we went online, as soon as they didn't quite understand something, I mean, it's a natural thing. I think a lot with, in particular, men at that age, where if they don't feel like they know exactly what they're talking about, they get very insecure about it, and then they don't want to ask. It's different when you're in class and you can ask a teacher, or you have your classmates where you might lean over and say, "Hey, what's this mean?" and they can explain it. But when you're at home and your friends are outside messing around, although they shouldn't be, or there's something else, you can be playing your video games, it's easier to turn that part off. And so I worry that we're going to lose some kids that were going to be college graduates that just gave up on academics because this is different and they're not used to it, and it's hard. I think the school is doing a very good job of trying their best to cater to what our kids need. But in a lot of instances, in particular with my team, it's been a struggle. And so, across the board, I agree with what Bill and Jason were both just saying, that we will also lose some of the younger generation who would otherwise be joining youth sports. They might get into something else because they can. Art, which is nothing wrong with that. Music, nothing wrong with that. Video games, turning into nothing wrong with that, because esports is turning into a big thing. But the actual get up and play and socialize, that's the part that I fear the most.
To follow up quickly on one thing Jesse mentioned about collegiate athletes, sometimes the thinking is, if you're not a particularly strong student or you're not really motivated, adding a sport at the collegiate level, that's going to really, get in your way. How are you going to balance that? And, when I talk to collegiate athletes, whether it's at Chestnut Hill College or other colleges, what a common theme I hear, not only when I speak with them, but when I speak with their parents, is the amount of structure that is provided and the amount of supports in place and accountability when you're on a collegiate team. Having to maintain the GPA you need to maintain to keep your eligibility. That type of support and structure ends up being a major advantage and actually helps student athletes perform. So even though they have very little time and they have the dual pressures of performing on the field and in the classroom, they have a lot of support, a lot of accountability. And I think Jesse's point's an excellent point. It doesn't surprise me that there's a number of student athletes that are really struggling, because with COVID-19 and the move to online learning, we don't have that same degree of engagement.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of the points that both Jesse and Bill were just making about that. And just in my experience, I've got a pretty good amount of experience working academically with student athletes at a number of different institutions. And yeah, I mean, they thrive, in my experience, they thrive on that structure and all of the support system that is provided by it. Just that face-to-face contact, knowing that I'm going to have to answer to someone if I don't go to class, or knowing that, I'm going to have to look that person in the eye, and explain why I didn't turn this assignment in, or whatever it might be, is really, really impactful and helpful for a lot of student athletes, particularly the ones that are sort of more at risk or sort of need a little bit more of a push to get going. So I can totally understand how difficult it is, but also keeping in mind that it's across the board, and this has been my experience sort of with a lot of my students and a lot of my classes, even those that aren't athletes. It's a struggle for them as well. The upheaval that has come with this and this switch to online instruction, it's a whole nother world, and it's really, really hard to sort of engage people in the same way that you do when it's face to face. So it's definitely a struggle all around that we're all sort of working through.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the conversations we've been having are, and I realize it, speak to the three of you as educators as well. It's very much about how so much of what we do is place based, and how we've had to each rethink the work that we do when it's temporarily not based in the place that we look forward to being in each day. I'm really interested in some of the concepts you brought up with regard to the way that some of the things about the progression of this, so that here we were, February, March, things were moving on, and then there was the suddenness of this. Just incrementally, things came to a halt, and I wonder if you could offer your perspectives on what that means psychologically, what that means competitively, from the perspective of a student athlete, but just in general. When something like this happens the way that it did, fundamental changes, but it sort of came on us in a couple of days' time. How should we be reacting to this? What are our student athletes seeing? What are they likely to be experiencing now? What are they likely to be experiencing over the summer, moving into next academic year? What are youth athletes experiencing at this point in time? What are they feeling?
I think competitively, I think that'll be okay when we finally get back and going. Mainly because everyone's in the same boat. No one's gaining except for those men and women that are hitting the weights every day and keeping their bodies in tip-top shape, which there are plenty of them. Competitively, it'll get back to normal. Well, a new normal, but normal. And I think that if the summer comes and goes and we get to the fall, that's going to be a whole. I can't answer the question yet because I don't know what that's going to feel like. But I do think this. I feel that doing things for them while we are in this keeps their interest alive. Setting up saying thank you to the seniors, Krista, and this doesn't have to do with athletics, but students in general, reaching out, our faculty and staff writing letters to the seniors, making it special for them. It's different. It's not what they expected, but I think it's going to be okay. I think the kind of world has changed, given us, pulled us back a little bit, made us realize the importance of other things over sports per se. The competitors, the athletes, they're going to get their bodies right and compete in the way that is allowed when the time comes. Obviously, I'm hoping it's sooner than later. I'm not a doomsday type guy. Right now, we're playing in the fall, and I'm hearing everything that the CDC is saying, and I'm watching the news, and it may be different. We may have masks on playing. We may have mini tournaments instead of full season leagues. There may be all different normal things, but I have to believe, and I'm hoping that a lot of the student athletes and the students are holding out like positive hopes that it's going to come back, and we're not really sure in what capacity. But as long as the adults keep on feeding that positive vibe and talking about what it's going to be like in a perfect world, we'll keep the hope where it needs to be. So I think that goes for youth sports. And I think listening to Bill, and I know Bill and I have spoken a lot about his son playing soccer and high level, and my kids all play and everything. And there was a part that was just, oh man, like I love watching my kids play. There was another part going like Tuesday night and we can have dinner together. Wednesday we can have Thursday we're having dinner together. Like, this is awesome. And I would bet the kids like it too. As much as they love their sport, as much as they love to play, like that's something that we're bringing. The family aspect is coming back to the world, and I'm hoping that will now filter into athletics when we come back too. You know what I mean? Maybe it doesn't have to be $5,000 to play on a team where you practice 7 days a week and travel to Indiana to play in a tournament you could have played across the street. Who knows? Maybe that's the way it ends up. But I think there is a lot of things to be hopeful about.
You know, that obviously resonates a lot with me, and kind of Jason's earlier point about perspective, where on one hand, there's a lot of positives, and I'll just speak to these sports where I've coached, and obviously my son plays. There's so many positives that we've already touched on, but there's a very strong case to be made that Jesse just mentioned. Is it too much? You know, with the fact that only 3% are going to play collegiately, and then less than 1% are going to earn a living playing sports, are we missing something here? And one anecdote I'll give, my son had a tournament down in Richmond, Virginia. And, you know, he's on a very good team, and we were playing very good teams down in Richmond, Virginia. But as we were driving, you know, I told my wife, I counted 6 clubs within 30 minutes of where we live that are going to give us just as good of a game as any of these teams down in Virginia. You know, so it kind of gets a little bit, it can get a little bit much. And, you know, I think as tragic and distressing as this whole situation is, you know, as you try and look for meaning and look for positives to kind of cope with it, there is this positive aspect of taking time to breathe, take stock, and really think about your priorities. And sports are an important part of our culture, important part of life, many, many benefits. But there's also a benefit to hitting the pause button and having some time to think about what's really important. We watch family movies now every Saturday night. That was in my household completely impossible for the last couple of years. So, and then there's just, you know, the chance to really fall in love with your sport again by getting a break from it. You know, so just a few anecdotes that around that.
Yeah, I think you raised some great points, and I was, you know, just thinking about, you know, perspective, and I'm also sort of, you know, trying to acknowledge and see the other side of it too, and make sure that you know, athletes know that it's okay for them to take a minute and, you know, this might sound like a strong word, but like grieve the loss of their season, grieve the loss of their sport, and that's okay. Like, you know, like you're feeling a little sad, you're feeling a little down because I'm a senior and I was going to play in this tournament for the last time and now I can't. That's traumatic, and it's okay to feel bad and to feel sad about that. You know, so I think, you know, athletes should know that they should be able to take advantage of that space and take that breather and just say, you know what, you know, this is what I'm feeling, and this is okay. You know, but then sort of the other side is don't live in that space, right? You don't have to stay there forever. And, you know, like Jesse's saying, sort of, you know, maintaining that optimism. You know, I think that's part of it too. You know, once you've sort of been able to take that beat and sort of grieve properly, also, you know, start to take stock of, all right, so what can I do? You know, what does this look like, you know, going forward? You know, what types of physical activities can I maintain? You know, like if this is part of my day, I work out, I stay in shape. You know, all right, I can't go to the gym now, but, you know, what can I do? Can I lift water jugs? Can I do push-ups? You know, all that type of stuff. And then other things that sort of get lost, sleep and nutrition. You know, are you up until 4 o'clock in the morning playing Call of Duty? Maybe you shouldn't be every night. You know, like, you know, making sure that you're getting proper amounts of rest, and making sure that you're maintaining some level of nutrition. I understand the challenges in that too. You know, as I'm, you know, home for 3 meals a day too, and it can be a challenge. But, you know, trying to figure that out and trying to find some balance in all of that as well, I think is important for athletes, especially as they sort of think about, you know, how can I return and be in the best space possible.
A very interesting point. we had 25 senior athletes. They all got they're all in the spring alone who lost their season. Only 4 are going to return to play that extra season. Going back to my point that and it's terrible. It's horrible that the other 21 are not, that they didn't get to play, but it's okay with them enough to move on with their life and be adults like we would. And that's, so again, upsetting, yes. But by no means is it the end of the world. It's time for them to move toward the next phase of their life. And that's kind of more why I focus on the younger kids, because they have so much more ahead of them that they need to kind of figure out.
Really,
Yeah, I think that's a really
perspective. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I think that's a really good point. And so one of the things I think about as you say that is this idea of multidimensional identity development. You talk about that a lot with athletes in terms of, how much do you identify with being an athlete versus other parts of yourself? And you find that people tend to be healthier, people tend to be more satisfied, and more insulated from the effects of this type of thing if they have a stronger sense of identity with other parts of themselves. So, that's another thing that I would sort of stress to athletes is sort of think about, who else am I when I'm not a basketball player or a football player or whatever it might be. And focus on those things now as well too. You can sort of build out some other different identities so that you can be more well-rounded and sort of operate in different ways.
Really appreciate your perspectives on everything we've talked about. With each of these interviews, I've ended just with inviting comments from each of the participants to talk about your work right now. So as we wrap up, if each of you could share, how's it going? What's it been like in your roles at the college, and share with us what that's meant for you, the students, and all the work that happens among you.
I will start from the athletic director's point of view. And if I lose you, Chris, I'm going to need you to accept me on my phone, because my iPad is plugged in and showing that it's charging, but it's dropped from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. So I'm going to try to get through this. It's been different, but in a way good. It's been good to be able to kind of reorganize, get the ducks in a row for next year in the event anything happens. We've been working on honoring the seniors. We've been working on honoring all the athletes for the year. It's given me an opportunity to reach out to certain kids individually with a personalized email to thank them for things that they've done that I don't have a chance to do during the year. And I might see them in the hallway and think like, you know what, he did an awesome job, or she did an awesome job. I want to tell, and I never get around to sending that email. That email is being sent now. And so just some more personal care towards the student athletes that I love doing, that I don't always get a chance to during a season where your day is 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays at times. And, it's important to me for the student athletes to know how much I care about all of our sports, all of those kids, making sure that they're making good decisions, making sure that they're getting their schoolwork in, helping with recommendations. So for that, there are days where I feel like I work more now than when I'm in there. But I also feel like that my work that I do now is a lot more concentrated, and I feel really good about it, as opposed to just getting through a day at sometimes, And just like any other time, just like anything else, there are days where you don't have as much to do, and that's welcomed as well.
Bill, Jason.
For me, it's the transition's been pretty smooth. I'm not a real big tech person, but at least I wasn't, 2 months ago, but I am now, and I have to say, this has been, it's one of those things, there's nothing you can do about it. So how do you make the best of it? And so there's been a lot of things that I probably should have been doing from a technology standpoint with my courses. I mean, they've always been pretty good with PowerPoints and videos and everything. It's not been like chalkboard, and chalk. But at the same time, there were certainly some things I was wanting to do or thought I should do, and now I'm doing it. And kind of to what Jesse said, I'm finding the efficiency is much higher, even during a lecture where it's more to the point. So maybe, I won't be able to tell as many jokes as I usually tell in class, covering more content. But so that's been, I think, in some respects, an advantage. The disadvantage from a teaching standpoint is just not being with students in the classroom. And I know you've mentioned this in a lot of your emails, Chris, that there is something there that it's hard to quantify, but it is lost. It's hard to read the room. It's hard to always ensure that students are getting everything they need in real time. There's ways to compensate for that. Just following up with them and being extra available, to answer questions. So there's been pluses and some drawbacks. From a research standpoint, this has been a very productive time because there's so much more time to get papers written and submitted for publication. So that's been a very big positive in terms of some of my work.
So I commiserate with you, Bill, on the loss of ability to land those jokes in the lectures in the same way that you normally would. It's sort of near and dear to my heart, so I'm missing out on that. But overall, the transition has been okay. Luckily, I tend to use a good amount of technology in my classes anyway, in terms of Canvas and online quizzes and that type of thing. I was already doing. So that's been fairly seamless. I guess the big thing for me is just trying to make sure that I'm always acknowledging that not everyone has the same quarantine experience. So it'd be easy to assume everyone's got a fast internet connection and everyone's got a space where they can work and everyone's got time. Everyone is just sitting at home when I recognize that there are some people, and I've had students who reach out to me and say, hey, I'm in charge of teaching my little brother now since I'm home and he's home and my parents can't do it. Or, I'm working full time in an essential role, so I have to work 12 hours a day and then come home. So, just trying to keep in mind that, not everyone sort of has that same experience, and where it seems like, oh yeah, everyone's just, sitting at home with internet and they can do everything. Try to keep in mind that is not necessarily always the case. So try to be mindful of that for all of my students. But I agree with both of you guys in terms of just, you have a little bit more of that sort of downtime to send those emails and check in with people and do that sort of thing. But it is a challenge, just sort of recording lectures and stuff like that is new to me. So, that was sort of interesting to get the hang of it. But overall, I think it's gone pretty well, and hopefully we can finish up strong and close this semester out.
That's great. Looks like Jesse's coming back to us here on his cell phone. There you go.
I'm sorry, you guys.
No worries. So, we're just wrapping up. So I just wanted to thank the three of you for taking the time today to join this conversation. It means a lot, I know, to a lot of us in the college community. Everything that you bring to us. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your generosity in offering your perspectives. Thanks for all you're doing on behalf of our students. I'm grateful and look forward to seeing everyone in person soon enough.